Here is the second part of the interview with Denys Pilash. We will pick up where we left off at the previous interview, and here is where we left off by way of review. Putin is kind of like the nexus, the gathering point, like the hub in a wheel for the far right, including fascist forces all around the world, including here in the United States.
Many have overlooked this actual importance of Putin's Russia as some kind of beacon for the international far right. And
Right.
actually, Putin's Russia is some kind of very important sponsor of a number of military dictatorships. So, for instance, the military junta in Myanmar, waging this bloody war against their own people, it relies heavily on the support of China and Russia. When the Africa, again, if we take this general situation, the ousted dictator Omar Bashir in Sudan, he was the first who led Wagner Group inside Africa in exchange for support of his murderous regime that was quite notorious for genocidal acts and wars that were waged inside the country. And now we have another conflict in Sudan where both sides, both the military junta and these forces, the former Janjaweed forces that are led by the former vice chairman of this junta, they both rely on Russian support and they both have ties with Wagner. And some of these generals were in Russia, in Moscow, on the day of the invasion of Ukraine, and they confirmed their full support for this. And you can continue all this. So, like military coups in Mali and Burkina Faso, they have been, again, the dictatorships that came to power, they are in very close relation with Putin's Russia, and they are heavily relying on the presence of Russian military, assistance. So it seems that yes, it combines lots of most reactionary and authoritarian forces throughout the world, and all of them are found in this nexus in Putin's Russia.
We shouldn't forget Cyril Ramaphosa, who had joint military maneuvers, naval maneuvers with both Russia and China, and also had the blood of the Maracana miners on his hands. It's no accident. I mean, Trump ideologically is aligned with Putin, but also he served for many, many years. He was a money launderer for the Russian oligarchs in the United States. And who was the biggest oligarch in Russia is
Putin.
We then went on to another question, and that is, true internationalists, of course, understand that Ukraine must have arms to fight the invasion, and they're getting those arms from sources such as Biden. But we know that the Biden support for Ukraine is unreliable, and there's also the question of what happens after the war. So that leads to the question, what role can internationalist socialists and an independent working class movement play in supporting Ukraine?
People in Ukraine, we also don't need to have some kind of illusions that Western leaders are so supportive of Ukraine because of their pure heart and their big interest in Ukraine. It's actually just for this conjuncture, international conjuncture, our interests of having some arms to defend ourselves and their interests, they coincided, but no more. I think the case of Syrian Kurds in Rojava that were the foremost force to defeat the so-called Islamic State. And then they were abandoned actually by their allies from the US. It's very telling. Yes. So until your interests in a way coincide, you will get the support. But afterwards, you are on your own. And this actually means that yes, we don't trust those Western governments. So we need to instead to reinvent, to rebuild the true internationalist leftist movement, the movement of peoples, the movement of working peoples, the movement of oppressed peoples, that at least should put this pressure on their own governments. But at its best, we need to think about our common uh, goal to overcome the existing neoliberal capitalist system and how we can achieve it. And now we got to the situation when many sectors on the left, they are dominated by way of campus thinking, of trying to root for the power that they feel is lesser evil. And actually, what when you mentioned Ramaphosa, and Ramaphosa, who went this full turn from an anti-apartheid activist, a trade union activist, who was bravely fighting against the racist regime in South Africa, and ultimately he becomes part of the elite. He becomes a capitalist himself, and he inflicts the this forceful suppression of the striking miners in Marikana. So this is some kind of full circle made by a representative of this compromising former left in a country of the global south. But again, what we've experienced since the start of the full-scale invasion, we have met both this complete ignorance and on many in the so-called left, especially those who came from the Stalinist tradition, but we had no high hopes in them. But also some others who claimed to be more reasonable in their analysis, but they ultimately provided no analysis, but just some cliches that meant nothing, and they replaced some kind of class analysis with a geopolitical one that tries to find, this power seems anti-Western enough, so we invest our anti-imperialist hopes to this actually other imperialist or sub-imperialist, because actually it's also some manifestation of your inner failure to change something from inside. So you root for some outer power that will change the situation. And ultimately, these people, they abandon all the principles of solidarity and freedom and egalitarianism for the sake of this campist way of thinking. But we also experienced enormous solidarity from all over the world. And actually, those people, socialists, Marxists, anarchists, who bothered to actually speak to actual Ukrainians, who bothered to think with their own heads and not rely on some outdated cliches or some, I don't know, patterns of thinking. They provided lots of help, both like symbolic solidarity and also political solidarity, and in some cases also practical solidarity. So like in your case, and what you are doing, and other people in Ukraine Social Solidarity campaign, and in some other North America based groups, and we can continue with lots of European ones, the likes of Left Alliance in Finland, Left Party in Sweden, Green Left Alliance in Denmark, both Socialist Left and Red Party in Norway. Also, obviously, those parties in Central Eastern Europe that have a more clear understanding of the history of Russian expansionism, like Razem in Poland, they were very supporting from day one. And also many parties, especially those who have been connected to some kind of Trotskyist, anti-Stalinist, democratic socialist traditions, like the Portuguese left bloc or the new anti-capitalist party in France, they also showed a full understanding of the situation here in Ukraine, and they also participated in many solidarity networks, like the European Network Solidarity with Ukraine, that is now going beyond Europe, and we have this every month meeting of the Global Network of Solidarity, or the other one that is more focused on labor union solidarity. And there we have also people from throughout the world, from Brazil, from Argentina, from South Korea, from Japan, from New Zealand. So you find also that there is this kind of very genuine solidarity, and these people are very consistent in they were opposing those imperialist invasions that were started by the US, like the invasion to Iraq, and they, in the same way, they also oppose all other expansionist and imperialist invasions, like
including
what,
Israel.
yeah, including Israel and Palestine, including Turkey against the Kurdish people, including Saudi Arabia and also Iran, what they do in the Middle East in general and in Yemen in particular. So yes, these are people who have a very clear internationalist position, and if you want to be if you want to build a world that would be based on other principles, then this capitalist one, you need to obviously to practice these principles in your everyday activity, and you cannot just neglect entire peoples, millions of people, because you see them as um, merely some pawns on the geopolitical chessboard, and you deny their agency, you deny that they are actual living people, and you also deny that these are majority working class people.
I asked Denys what his views were on what kind of role, if any, socialny root or social movement could play in helping to regenerate a healthy socialist tendency internationally.
And there were lots of other countries and their leftist groups that also experienced these dilemmas of solidarity and lack of it. So, but I think that really, from our position and from these spontaneous solidarity networks that actually emerged in Europe and throughout the world. So yes, we can see this as some of not exclusively the only ones, but some of those um, embryos of future um, movements that can span like over the regions and build these bridges, very important bridges um, between peoples in different contexts, but who share um, the situation of surviving in the situation of um, war, conflict, but also just ordinary everyday capitalism. So I think that we need to reevaluate what is now accomplished by different groups that claim themselves leftists, and actually concentrate on those who actually do the work in the grassroots. So there are people who are uh, really involved into everyday struggles on the workplaces, in the unions, in the different social movements, people who are engaged in some ecological climate activism throughout the world, and who and there are also people who I don't know, present themselves at some inner circles of their friends as gurus of progressive thought, but actually who got detached from the actual movements. So we need to go back to the ground and actually to to build this new left internationalism from below. Yes, to try to go from the grassroots and from what emerged in a not very not very organized way. So it was very spontaneous, but ultimately we found ourselves inside lots of these networks that ask questions not about Ukraine and not just about support of us here, but also who try to go beyond and to make our concrete problems that were so highlighted by this war show how they connect with everyday grievances of people throughout the world, and how those demands that we put forward, like the cancellation of Ukrainian foreign debt, like destroying the system of tax haven offshore capitalism that is also used by Russian and Ukrainian oligarchs, like actually moving forward beyond the fossil fuel capitalism, how they actually connect into a global picture of a global democratic and socialist alternative to the current world order. So I think that if we come back to these basics and we speak with and cooperate with movements in other parts of the world, and especially I think it's quite important to show people in different contexts who have different specific imperialisms that they face and different specific challenges, but ultimately we can see that the patterns of this dependency and the patterns of inequalities, they are pretty the same, like inside the capitalist world system. So in a way, we need to explain to people in Eastern Europe the situation of the people in the so-called global south, and also to explain to the people in the so-called global south situation of the people in the post-Soviet space. So in a way, it's a huge task, but it's something that is inevitable if you want to actually change the world.
So this is a good stopping point for this segment of the interview with Denys. In the next segment, which will be the last segment, we'll be talking about some specific programmatic ideas for a working class socialist campaign, which can link up the class struggle at home with support for Ukraine. Specifically, we'll be talking about a campaign to seize the assets of Russian but also Ukrainian oligarchs who have invested their ill-gotten gains through money laundering schemes in the United States and elsewhere. So we hope you'll tune in for this coming last segment of the interview.